Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Super happy about this show today. First of all, happy to be back here on a Monday. Thanks for being here with us and making it possible for us to get to do this every day. We're very happy that we do get to do it, and we're happy that you spend the time with us. If you want to call today, we're taking calls both hours, 888-318-7884. Second hour, Everett Fritz will be here. He's just one of the great thinkers about how to evangelize families, how to evangelize young people, teens, and everybody else. And so we're going to talk a bit about forming the leaders of the Catholic future. If you'd like to get involved in that conversation, 888-318-7884. This hour, one of our really good friends is back, and we haven't seen her in a long time, and it's really nice to have Dr. Stacy Trasancos with us this hour. You know that when Stacy's here, that means we're going to talk faith and science. If you've got a faith and science question or a faith and science challenge, you're very welcome this hour, 888-318-7884. You most certainly don't have to be Catholic. Anybody can call. Maybe science is giving you some trouble with your faith. Maybe your faith is giving you some trouble with science, or maybe you just have a question about one or the other. 888-318-7884. Stacy Trasancos has her PhD in chemistry from Penn State University, and then she went and worked for DuPont for a while trying to figure out what plants do. Turns out it's really hard to figure out what plants do. She came into the Catholic Church. She's a mom. She's got an MA in theology. Now she's getting an MA in philosophy. And she does a lot of this faith and science stuff. And I'll mention her books in a little bit, but most particularly Particles of Faith. I think that's probably the most famous one, where she talked about this, about the kind of the ways in which exploring the world through faith and science are both joyful tasks to undertake. Dr. Stacy Trasancos, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Cy. It's good to be back again.
I feel like I'm happier about it than you are. You don't seem like I'm super happy that you're back.
I'm happy.
Well, you faked that very well. 888-318-7884. Why are you getting another master's degree? What's that about?
It's something I've wanted to do for a long time. I'm in my 50s now. I'm a grandmother. I'm starting to really reflect on life and where I'm going. And I seem to be like lost in the cosmos among Catholics, because I don't understand. When people start talking philosophy, I just go like a deer in the headlights.
Oh.
But they use words that I know from chemistry, like substance and category and genus and species. And it's like two different languages. And one thing I'm very passionate about is integrating in a modern way, modern science with philosophy and theology. So I figured I better take some time and learn what this philosophy stuff is all about. And it's really fascinating, but it is a whole different language.
Yeah, it's funny. You say it's like two different languages, but in some weird ways, it's like one language being used two completely different ways. So you might, I know you mentioned to me before the use of the word nature. So when you're talking about nature as a scientist, you're not using that word the way Thomas Aquinas is when he talks about human nature, for example.
Exactly. And I just wrote a paper on that for one of my professors, because I wanted to get my head around it. I know what we mean when we say nature. And I even looked in a lot of physics textbooks and chemistry textbooks, biology textbooks. They throw around the word nature all the time, and it's actually used very much the way Aristotle used it. I mean, the people writing the books don't understand, like I don't understand. They don't understand what they're saying, but it's a concept we all have in our head. And so that's one word. I think if we could get some chemists and biologists and physicists at a table with some philosophers and theologians, and I know people do this, but I'm talking about fundamental stuff.
Yeah.
Get them together and let's take this concept of nature and let's talk about what that word means, because I don't think it would be hard to come up with a unified definition. And I think once you start to unify the language to match the concepts that are in all our heads, we will be going a long way to unifying science, philosophy, and theology. And it'll be helping modern science too, because they need some help understanding those things.
I think it's a very...
They, meaning scientists.
Right. It's a very worthy undertaking. I got to tell you, I saw you and listened to your interview on The Journey Home. And it was fantastic, Stacy. I don't know if people can go back and watch those again, but it was fantastic. And I was like, I want to be Catholic now, listening to you talk about the Catholic faith and science. And then I was so happy when I remembered I'm already Catholic. But you did a fantastic job. I thought the conversation the two of you had was just wonderful.
Yeah, and he's kind of Marcus Grodi is a scientist himself, so we had a lot in common and a lot to talk about. And the really joyful thing, I mean, talk about a word, science. There's so much to that word, science. And he and I were talking about that. I really love the definition that I kind of created after reading Father Stanley Yockey's work, and Marcus and I were talking about it. Science is the study of the handiwork of God. And if you start impressing that upon people, I know atheists will be like, say what? You're crazy. Get out of here. But if we just start saying, yeah, but that's how we view science as Catholics. Like, that was one of the biggest things in my conversion. Like, stop pretending like we're not Catholic when we talk about science just so we can talk to the scientists. Learn all you can about science and then be fully Catholic. Let everybody know I'm looking at this through the lens of faith, and it makes a whole lot of sense to look at the world and see that it's good, it's ordered, it's created in love. This is our home that God gave us, and that when we do science, we're really learning more about God's handiwork, how he did things. It's much cooler to look at science that way than just like doing it so you can get a job.
888-318-7884. One of the things that struck me, I know that you taught, when you taught high school chemistry, you were telling me that putting the chemistry that they were learning into a faith context actually made them more interested in the chemistry. Because it wasn't just she's making us go to this foreign land of mathematics and elements, but that they were actually exploring something that mattered.
Exactly. It made. I still have students to this day. I was just at Notre Dame University back in November. And I saw a former student there, and they remember. She said she remembers what I said about science being the study of God's handiwork, and it made her want to go on and learn science, and more than that, to do something good for humanity. She's studying neuroscience because of her knowledge of science. So it's a game changer, and it's so far beyond that tired old conflict myth, and I appreciate that you remembered that, Cy, because that was one of my best memories of teaching those kids at Colby Academy was telling them that and watching how it changed the way they approached science, because otherwise kids hate physics. Like, what's the point of learning physics and chemistry?
Yeah,
it's so abstract to them.
Right. There's a lot of us who need a narrative of why am I doing this? We need that account in order to, even kids who study mathematics, we study, okay, so you study math, but why do we have to learn this? That's like one of the main questions I'm sure math teachers are sick of hearing. But, but when that is appreciated in the context of faith, that this is the language God has used in his creation of the world. Well, now you got a reason to study mathematics. It fits into a story. And not everybody needs the story. Some people are just overwhelmed in their fascination with mathematics. But for those who do need the story, it makes it having the story makes it much easier to study those things. 888-318-7884, the number I see calls coming in. By the way, if you want to challenge Dr. Trasenkos on whatever she has said, you are welcome to do that. She loves talking about these things, and she's not going to break. And so if you disagree about science being the study of the handiwork of God or about any of it, that's welcome. But also, if you're just having trouble with a scientific question in the context of faith, maybe there's some of the things that happen in the Bible, for example, contradict science, or some of the things that are claimed by our faith contradict science. If you've got those questions, 888-318-7884. Dr. Stacy Trasenkos is our guest. We're talking faith and science this hour on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
If one person's faith has been nourished by this program, it's worth it. And knowing that people of all different walks of life are listening, but also getting something out of it, that's the excitement I find in it.
EWTN Open Line Monday with Father John Trujillo. Tonight, 10 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. We never know what's going to happen with one of these faith and science hours. Sometimes it gets to be contentious, which I find fun, and sometimes it is just a great intellectual exercise in trying to understand these various aspects of faith and science. Whatever happens today, you're welcome here, 888-318-7884. I think we've already established that I am much happier to see Stacey Trasancos than she is to see me. I don't know why that is, but I am thrilled that she's back.
True.
You're just so
Not
unconvincing. So unconvincing.
I'm just nervous because my camera is messing up.
Oh, I see. Yeah, well, it might be your camera. It might be our equipment. We don't know, but let's see. Only one line open, Stacey. Should we go right to the phones, or do you want to do something else first?
I'm ready.
All right, let's go to Tito in Houston, Texas, listening on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Tito, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Stacey Trasancos.
Sure. I was curious that they share the same language. Didn't science used to be a branch of philosophy called natural philosophy, and it just went from there and became science? The term was coined in the 19th century or so. I was just curious to know if Stacey was aware of that.
Yes, that's something I've been learning about. Like, natural philosophy is what used to mean science. I mean, I've been writing about and teaching students, high school and college students, because I have some college classes on church and science. That the word science used to be a much bigger word than the way we use it today. I mean, the way we use it today is really truncated from the way we used to use it. And I have them look at the Oxford English Dictionary definition just to see the history of the word, even in English. Science used to mean a body of knowledge that we discover from reasoning, discursive reasoning process. And natural science was just a branch of bodies. It was a body of knowledge that had to do with nature and the natural world. And that term just kind of got pushed aside, I guess, after Galileo and Isaac Newton, whenever we started quantifying the movement of objects with mathematics, and which was the game changer. That was the scientific revolution. And then science became modern science, and it became later chemistry, biology. And so now we have the physical sciences. But even today, that word science isn't limited to just the physical sciences. We have social sciences, economic sciences. And it would be good. That's another one of those words, just to get back to the base, is to get everybody around a table and say, this is the history of the word. This is what natural science used to be. Where are we now? That's one thing I'm learning in philosophy. We can have concepts in our mind, but how we say those concepts, with the words we apply to them and communicate what we mean is essential to how we communicate with each other. And so I think a lot of people are using words and they're not really sure what that word means. I always find in my church and science classes, the college students who are science majors are blown away to realize they don't really know what science means. And so we have to go through a process of talking about it and examining where the word came from, what it means today. It kind of was a big word, and now it's a small word, and we need to take it back out again to a big word.
Tito, what do you think?
Amen, sister. Hey, Si, I just want to add, I'm very excited to speak with you.
See, there's somebody who, I appreciate that, Tito. I think you could tell in Stacey's voice. She wasn't that fired up to see me again, but I'll get over it.
It's not you.
Something I just want to follow up on what you and Tito were discussing, though, that the modern kind of mania for specialization also means that people don't know what words mean in the other disciplines. So if I'm super specialized in physics, which I got to do to be a really high level physicist, then and I hear the word, like just the word we used before, nature. I've learned the how that word is used in my specialized field, and I can't talk to people in a theology or a philosophy or a literature department. And I'm sure there are many who don't want to, but I think a normal person wants to be able to communicate with other people.
That's part of the education that's in front of us is telling people why they need to care about this. I mean, because what we want to lead the chemists and biologists and physicists towards is that when we're talking about the nature of a thing, what we're talking about is, what did God create this thing to be? I mean, we can talk about my Samsung Galaxy laptop, and I can talk about the nature of it because mankind created it and the designers of it know what they created it to be and do, and I can talk about its properties. But when we're looking at nature and we're looking at a dog that God created and the genus of animal, we mean a certain thing by that. And it would really behoove the chemist and the physicist and the biologist to understand that fuller word, because right now they kind of stop where, this is what happens in nature. They're just talking about the world and this is what happens naturally. They're not really thinking about why does what happens naturally happen? Why are there animals? Why are there people? And maybe there are some who will see where this is going. Like we're going to end up talking about God and how we're different from all other animals because we have a rational soul if we keep going down that path. But, if Aristotle and Plato and Socrates could do it so long ago, I think we could do it today, too.
Yeah, that's right. Right, if we have the will to. And that it's a wonderful contribution. I think it's just fantastic, Stacey. You're getting this other master's degree. And really the purpose is you want to be able to talk across disciplines so that people can start to talk with one another about the real world.
And you know what I'm going to get to, and I haven't said it to any of my professors yet who are philosophers who get kind of frustrated with me because they think I'm a materialist because I can't stop thinking about atoms.
Yeah.
I love atoms, man. But I'm going to look at the philosophers out there one day and the theologians. I'm going to be like, hey, guys, if I can learn theology and philosophy, your turn. You need to come over here and sit in my physics class and my chemistry class and let me tell you what's going on here because you need to know this.
Well, that's wonderful. If you're the only person, we all kind of laugh when you say, I love atoms, man, because we know you as the person who loves atoms around here. Let's go to Columbus, Ohio. Tito, thank you for that call. Tom in Columbus, Ohio, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Dr. Stacey Trasenkos is our guest. Go ahead, Tom, with your question. Tom, do I have you there? I thought I heard him. Well, I can come back to him. Tom, we'd love to talk with you, but I will. I'll work my way back around. I'm going to go to Patrick in Grand Rapids, Michigan. In the meantime, Tom, I'm not going to hang up on you. So if you hang on, I will check the line in a second. Patrick in Grand Rapids is listening on Ave Maria Radio. Patrick, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Stacey Trasenkos.
Okay, guys, you're going to have to forgive me because I don't have a question, and I'm going to be very brief because when I turned on the radio, listening to you, I went, oh my gosh, I have to tell you what happened 3 months ago, and maybe this will be something that, doctor, you can use. I don't know. We're in a sales meeting, big grease board, we're waiting to do the meeting, and we're talking about this topic. 5 or 6 people in there, and it was, God, and it was definitely not a business topic. And I said, well, listen, if you're so smart, and this person is very smart, I want you to go right up on the grease board what the most famous scientific equation is. And what do you think they wrote? Real big, E.
Oh, I thought I was going to get the guess. Sorry, I was really going to try to impress you there. But all right, go ahead.
I'm trying to be fast because I don't want to get in front of somebody else's question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So they wrote E equals MC squared. And I sat back and I went, that is really an incomplete equation. And I wrote up, and the greater sign and less than sign, I wrote, it's less than God. So it was E equals MC squared is less than God. And everybody just stopped. and I'm just sitting, I'm listening to somebody a lot smarter than me, because another person in there after the meeting, she goes, Patrick, you ought to write a book and entitle it that on the front of the book. And I said, I'm not smart enough.
That's all right. I'm going to steal it anyways, Patrick. I just stole your idea. So, so what do you make of that? Because that seems to fit with what you say, Dr. Trasancos.
Yeah, it pushes you to ask deeper questions, because if you say E equals MC squared, I think you could do this even with a glass of lemonade. If you look at anything, you're ultimately going to wonder, where did it come from? Where did energy and mass and the speed of light come from? How do we know that relationship between energy, mass, and the speed of light? Why does light even have a speed? Why does light travel at that speed? And why is the universe made the way it is? I think, or if you're looking at a glass of lemonade and you're talking about sugar molecules and lemons and how they grow on trees and where trees came from and why we have life on Earth. You can walk anything back like that all the way back to God. Like, honestly, nothing in life makes sense. Nothing about our existence makes sense if you're cutting off God and you're just only willing to look so far. It's not that exciting just to look to E equals MC squared and say, oh, okay, now I understand how the universe works. No, you don't. You have an equation that you're not even really sure how Einstein came up with it.
And you probably don't even know what the E and the M and the C stand for. I know what squared is, but what do you think, Patrick?
No, I thought that was good. I
Thank
just thought it was you could start off a lesson with it. But anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the book idea. I
Thank
appreciate you letting me take that. Let's go back to Tom in Columbus, Ohio, listening to EWTN on Channel 130 Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Let's see if we can connect with Tom. Tom, are you there with us?
Yes.
Oh, hi, Tom. Go ahead with your question or comment for Dr. Stacy Trasancos.
My question is, if the universe operates according to quantum mechanics, and quantum mechanics has no beginning and no end, it kind of starts in the middle, how do we rationalize that in terms of the Christian opinion that the universe had a beginning and it will have an end?
Okay. I think I understand your question. And just to keep things short, I'm going to answer it, but correct me if I didn't understand it the right way. So I don't know if quantum mechanics assumes that there's no beginning or end, but certainly before the Big Bang theory came along, that was the prevailing cosmological consensus, that there was this steady state universe and that there was no beginning in time. During those days, Father Georges Lemaitre, the physicist who came up with what would later be called the Big Bang theory, that posits a time equals zero, a beginning in time, assumes a time equals zero, even he, so if what you're saying about quantum mechanics, even he operated as a physicist in a culture that didn't scientifically think there was a beginning in time. And when he posited the Big Bang theory, he was actually accused of letting his faith tell him what his science needed to be. And he said, no, that's not true. My equations are pointing me in this direction. So the point there is, even if science has this assumption in its equations that there is no beginning in time, no end in time, it's just for the parameters of those equations. It doesn't mean there really is or isn't a beginning in time. The Big Bang theory itself doesn't prove a beginning in time. It assumes a beginning in time. And so you really always kind of, if you remember that science is the study of the handiwork of God, you're really always just kind of figuring out what we can learn from science, knowing that the ontological reality is something that science will never fully describe. It strives to describe reality, but it probably doesn't completely. Same with evolution. And quantum mechanics very much is a description of what we can see. So I get into arguments with physicists here. As a chemist, quantum mechanics to me helped me figure out where electrons probably were so I could make stuff. And sometimes I treated electrons and photons like particles. Sometimes I treated them like waves. Whatever works to make stuff, I'm good. So I was never like using quantum mechanics to tell me exactly what reality is. I was using it to probe reality and find an equation that worked to predict what I wanted to do. So I don't know if it's true that quantum mechanics says there's no beginning and no end, but even if it did, it's just a scientific theory. We don't know everything.
Tom, I'm going to come back to you, and we'll check back in with you because it's a fascinating question when we come back. And I've actually never used quantum mechanics to do anything. Nothing, like literally nothing have I ever used quantum mechanics. So I'm anxious to hear how you and Stacy work this out. Dr. Stacy Trasancos, our guest. The number 888-31-TRUTH. We're talking faith and science on Catholic Answers Live. The recent decision by the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade was a monumental victory for the pro-life movement. But the fight is far from over. With our new booklet, Why We're Pro-Life, we have produced the perfect tool to prepare you to have peaceful and convincing conversations to shed light on the truth about human life from conception to natural death. Catholic Answers is printing millions of copies of this booklet, and we plan simply to give them away. You can help us in two ways. First, by generously supporting this project. 25 cents prints one book. $2,500 prints 10,000, and so on. Second, by helping us distribute the booklet through your parish, your school, or the pro-life ministry you work with. Catholic Answers is going to blanket the country with why we're pro-life, but only if you step up and help us. Thank you so much. For more information, visit whyweareprolife.com.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
Catholic Answers Live is 25 years old. That's a quarter century helping people come into deeper communion with the Catholic faith. As we move into our second quarter century, please help us reach thousands more by becoming a Society 315 monthly donor. Right now, when you join Society 315 at a monthly giving level of $25 or more, we've added some extra perks to the other great benefits we already offer members. Go to GiveCatholic.com and choose the monthly option to start your donation. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I said I was going to go back to Tom, but Tom dropped. Not exactly sure what happened, but we don't always know what happened there. But so we will assume that was a satisfactory answer.
Hi.
Was that Jeanette Bankovich? Was she? Let's go to Lori in Akron, Ohio. Is she trying to take over the show? Living Bread app she's listening on. Lori, we're happy you're here. Go ahead with your question for our guest, Dr. Stacy Trasancos.
Thank you. I was wondering if you're familiar with Graham Hancock. My husband and I recently watched a series that he's done on Netflix called Ancient Apocalypse. It's, archaeological in nature. So I wanted to know your opinion of that in light of Bible and, Adam and Eve and Noah and, the timeline and everything. So I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, I haven't. Lori, I haven't watched that. The last thing I watched on Netflix was Narcos. So very different. I do watch Netflix, but I was interested in the history of drugs in America. But could you tell me a little bit about the basic thesis?
Oh, I was afraid you were going to ask me that. Well, I guess to put it in a nutshell, he has traveled all over the world and discovered numerous sites where there appear to be structures that were formed before the Ice Age, and he's at odds with archaeologists. They think he's out of his mind, and he thinks they're closed-minded. So there is that whole thing going on, but he's looking for more evidence of a prehistoric civilization that was more advanced than the typical hunter-gatherer that we usually think of. And he's saying that these structures exist because there were some civilizations dating way back, prehistoric ice age, that had advanced technology, advanced astronomy, advanced engineering skills to build these amazing structures.
Stacy, what do you think, Stacy?
The way I approach things like that is I just kind of let the scientists do their job. So is it possible that something like that could be discovered? It's always possible that something like that. It's always possible that we haven't discovered all of the fossils and the archaeological digs that are to be discovered, and that something could be discovered that force us to rethink what we know about the past, because we know so little about the ancient past, especially before anybody could write things down. And is it possible? Yes, there's no conflict with our faith on something like that, because again, we're studying nature. And if something is really there and we discover it and we need to figure out what happened, no conflict with our faith. Now, what usually happens though is sometimes people get data and they don't analyze it well, or they don't analyze it honestly, or they have an agenda. And that is always human. It's always going to be. But I happen to think that over time, the truth trickles up. So even if now on Netflix there's something and it's controversial like that, let it play out. And if this guy is just trying to make a series for money, that'll become evident someday. And if he's not, and if he's onto something, which Netflix thinks he is, then that will sift to the top someday. So I don't get too worried about things like that, but I think it's absolutely fine and no contradiction with faith to be interested in things like that. I'm interested in the history of drug use in America just because I didn't know all of that about, the drug lords and smuggling and all of that. So be interested.
Lori, I actually think your television choices are better than Stacy's, but we'll have to leave it there. This does seem like a thing for Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, though. I think you should suggest it there, Lori. And I'm only moving on because the lines continue completely full for Stacy. So I suggest that for Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, and on we go. Eric in Kansas, listening on 101.7 FM. Eric, thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Stacy Trasancos.
Yes, Dr. Stacy. I'm just curious about your view of evolution. I am a Catholic, but I do not believe in any form of biological evolution whatsoever. I believe God did what he intended, and that's basically it.
Well, and the church says that you are free to believe that, but I don't think it makes any sense. I don't think it jives with what we see. I mean, if God just made everything the way he intended and that's it, it's too much like God not being this loving creator who's involved in all of our lives. I mean, I've had 7 children and every one of them was very different, and they're part of the human species, but they're also different. They're unique as individuals. And I don't find it talking about macroevolution and the evolution of different species of animals over time. I don't find that to be a problem at all. If nature works where animals breed and reproduce, and natural selection can cause some to survive, some genes to survive in the gene pool and others not, because of pressures on reproduction, I don't find that to be a difficulty. I also don't think we know everything about evolution that there is to know. I think there are other factors that might drive the emergence of new species and the extinction of other species. I think it's amazing that there's so many different kinds of life in the world today. The New York Times said one time on the front page, scientists only know about a quarter of the species of life in the ocean. And I remember thinking, how do they know they only know a quarter? Because that would presume they know the whole thing. But there's so many life forms that we don't know about. And sure, God created things the way he wants them to be, but he's also drawing all of nature and all of creation toward an end, a teleological end that he wills. So obviously we will disagree. I don't find a problem with evolution. I just think it's misunderstood by a lot of people. That's not saying that you're dumb because you don't agree with me. I'm not in the same place as you are.
Eric, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for the call. I am aware that we have limited time with Dr. Trasenkos, and on we go. So we'll go to Aaron in Illinois, listening on Catholic.com. That's our website, Catholic.com. Eric, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Trasenkos.
Hi. Looking into the traditional, the church fathers and how they'd talk about the incarnation, they would always attribute the humanity of Christ wholly to Mary, whereas with today's modern science, we would understand the distinction between the X and Y chromosomes and how Mary wouldn't have a Y chromosome to give to Jesus. But still today, in modern discussions of it, I hear them reiterating what the early church fathers said a whole lot and never really discussing much the implications of the science of the Y chromosome. And I don't have a problem with that because God could have created a Y chromosome, but I was just wondering if there's any reason why they emphasize that it was Holy Mary who gave God his humanity, or what your thoughts would be on that.
I think that's just one of those questions we don't know. I think it's in that same bucket as Mary's perpetual virginity. Like, how did the baby child get out of her? We don't know those exact details, but yet we know her virginity was perpetual. We know Christ was fully human, fully divine, but he didn't leave any DNA behind for us to study. I wish he had sometimes, but that's just my limited knowledge. But Christ didn't leave any DNA behind. There have been some Eucharistic miracles, the ones in Buenos Aires in particular, that posited that they had the host turned to flesh, and they had the flesh analyzed, and there was DNA, they said, but when they tried to analyze the sequence of the DNA, they couldn't. Now, I tend to think maybe that was just because there wasn't any DNA there, and that what they were actually seeing was contaminant DNA from people who touched the host, because you get DNA on things whenever you touch something. But other people have said that's proof that since Jesus Christ did not have a biological father, the DNA is not the same as the rest of human DNA. I actually challenged that in my book, Behold It As I said, I think that's going too far. It's they are saying with theological certainty something that the church has not said with theological certainty. So I don't think we know what Jesus Christ's DNA looked like. I don't think we know the nucleic acid sequence of it. Maybe Jimmy, that's another one for Jimmy Akin on his show sometime.
Okay, Aaron? No, Aaron? All right. There could be a little bit of a phone thing going on. I don't know. That we might have a little delay because we've missed on a couple of people this hour, but we're doing the best we can. And we got another Aaron in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But Aaron number 2, if you'll hang on a quick second, we'll do this break and we'll come right back with more conversation about faith and science with theologian and scientist Dr. Stacy Trasenkos right after this.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
He was a mystic and reformer who died at the age of 33.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Catherine of Siena accomplished something no one thought possible. She convinced Pope Gregory XI to return to Rome after the popes had lived in France for almost the whole of the 14th century. They've been there ever since.
To find out more, visit EWTN.com and click on Catholicism.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. It's a lot of fun when Dr. Stacy Trasancos is here because she's a scientist, she's a theologian, and now she's working on being a philosopher as well. And it's, boy, the modern world has a lot of points at which you'd say, I wish I had a scientist and a theologian to talk about that with me, because it seems to need both, and that's what she provides, and that's why we get lots of calls when she's here. And I promised Aaron in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that I would go right to him when we came back. And so, Aaron, listening on St. Michael Radio in Oklahoma, you are up next. Go ahead with your question or comment for Dr. Stacy Trasancos.
I cut out. Can you hear me?
We can hear you very well, yeah.
Okay, I can't hear you very well, but all right. I struggle with the concept of God's infinite goodness. So here's my question. If He makes organic beings that are killed by things like, say, gamma radiation, and He puts us on this planet that is constantly bombarded with deadly frequencies. And yet, if I have a baby and then put that baby in harm's way intentionally or unintentionally, I am criminally negligent at the very least. So how do I reconcile with God being good and yet having these realities? You know, it's like a parent keeping a firearm in the house for protection, but is then misused by a child to harm others. And that's not the intention of the parent, but yet they're still criminally liable for that. It feels less accidental since God is supposed to be both omnipotent and omnipresent. So He would know how gamma rays would happen. Why would He do this? How do I consider Him good and yet putting us in this obvious trap that has nothing to do with our own decisions?
Stacy?
Well, it's the usual suffering question. Why is there suffering? And my best answer, and there's a lot of different answers to that question. There's the theological answer that God knows the big picture. God knows the end from the beginning, and we're just here at this point in time, and we don't know everything, and we don't understand the big picture. And that if we keep the faith, everything will turn out okay in the end. Kind of like the kid in the house whose parents have a gun. The child doesn't understand why he can't play with it. The parent knows more, and the relationship of a child to a parent is nothing compared to the infinite distance between us and God. So we have to have faith. And for me, this is just Stacy Trasancos talking, who my biggest title is mother and grandmother now. So I have a whole bunch of grandkids getting older, and with a big family, there's a lot of tragedy, like just what you're talking about with gamma radiation. We had a grandson that was born prematurely last October, and his mother fought so hard to get him here alive. Great sacrifice to get that baby born alive, and he was getting better, all the best medical care, getting better, and he died after 11 days because he got a blood infection, E. coli of all things. And I have talked to my priest about it. I'm mad at God. I've called it mad faith. I have mad faith, and what I mean by that is I'm mad at God. I don't understand why that had to happen. It does not make any sense to me whatsoever, because now my precious daughter is really, she thinks she's God's least favorite person in the world, because she's like pretty much turned away because she's so distraught and destroyed by this. She doesn't understand. My mad faith means I still believe that God is good. I still believe that there is, I'm not going to say there's a purpose in all that. I still believe that baby, Saint Amias, is in heaven, and that I will see him again someday, that this will all make some kind of sense someday. I'm terribly worried about my daughter. And so in this valley of tears in this world where I don't understand gamma radiation and E. coli and why bad things have to happen, I, Stacy Trasancos, have to, even though I have mad faith, I have to have this black tunnel where I just breathe and look at that black tunnel and let everything else, I know it sounds kind of mystical, but everything else has to fall away, and I focus on the light, which is Christ. And I just say, Jesus, I trust in you. Because I have learned in my life at age 53 that when I stop focusing on Christ in that tunnel and I start trying to fix everything around me myself, I can't. And I sometimes make things worse. So that's my mature woman answer. And I won't say that I totally have all the suffering figured out. I just know that if there weren't free will and if this weren't a fallen world, we'd just already be in heaven. So we're in a fallen world. We're in a world with people who have free will, and there is evil and there is suffering. And I'm not going to lie to you and say I have it all theologically and philosophically figured out, because I don't. But I am keeping the faith.
Aaron?
Yeah, I'm here. She had cut out, but I started to hear that. And I hear you, but at the same time, I struggle with, if I can control what reality is, then why choose a reality where just simply being, just simply standing on the planet that I was born on is killing me? That doesn't seem right. And if there's a fall, does that mean the fall and creation of all of creation was somehow twisted, so that all of time, space, our entire reality that we know, since he's outside of time and space, is now a corrupted version of itself? But if so, then there are miracles, and miracles are supposed to be able to counteract that. But they seem capricious and whenever, not in a specific formulaic manner. So I hear you, but it still bothers me a lot.
Yeah. I think you know, I remember reading in the book Introduction to Christianity, Pope, before he was Pope Benedict, Professor Ratzinger at the time, saying that there are some things where both the believer and the unbeliever have to sit together and say, I don't know, is the answer. It doesn't mean that we have the same response to it, but it is fair to say both have to say, I don't know. And suffering is and suffering and death are the great I don't knows for everyone. Nobody, but there's that doesn't take away the possibility of faith, as Stacy said, that still and I don't know, you know, faith. I don't believe in the word capricious can be applied to God, but why does God give faith to some and seems not to give it to others? I don't know. I don't know that, but it is possible still to have faith even in the face of suffering and death, and to still have to sit with the answer, I don't know. I don't know why God allows that. But I do know I have to keep going, Aaron, and I want to go because Conrad
That's a good
called.
question, Aaron.
It's a wonderful question. We all I remember Pope Benedict when he was Pope. The interviewer said to him, "What do you want to ask God when you see him face to face?" And he said, "Why all this suffering?" And he was not saying that as a person with no faith, but we all want an answer to that question. Why? Why all this suffering? And there is an answer to it. That's what faith tells us. Conrad in Ireland, listening on EWTN. Thank you for your call. Conrad, go ahead with your question for Dr. Stacy Trasancos.
Hi, Dr. Trasancos. It's nice meeting you. I have a question. In fact, for the past few years, I have found that the science as we know it and religion are completely incompatible. The Bible is full of these things from start to finish. And I'd like one sentence answer for this question is, the miracle of the loaves and fishes, how can that be described in a chemical or a physical context? That's it.
Yep. Are you finished?
Yeah, he said that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. So that's a great question. I remember reading something from C.S. Lewis in his book on miracles, and I believe that was the book. He was making the point that some of the miracles that Christ worked were simply speeding up what happens in nature. And so, bread eventually would, the seeds would eventually grow and multiply. Fish would multiply. The water turning to wine would, given the right conditions with the grapes and everything, and sugar and fermentation would happen naturally. So sometimes he speeds up things that happen naturally. But here's the thing about miracles. Miracles don't break the laws of nature. If God created everything and God preordained these laws of nature that we study, if they're prescriptive laws. God made the laws of nature that dictate how fish multiply and how bread multiplies. A miracle would necessarily be something that does not follow the laws of nature that we know. That's what St. Augustine said, and what St. Aquinas said later, repeating what Augustine said, that a miracle is something that happens against the order which we know. And so, the God who created everything out of nothing could also intervene in nature and make something happen that doesn't otherwise happen for the sake of our salvation. It's always to communicate his love to us. And so that story has become a story that's told in the Bible, and it was part of Christ's ministry and his life. And we use that story now in our own lives. Like for me, how can I multiply what God gave me? Do I have so much faith that even against the laws which I know, the laws of my country, the laws of nature, the laws in chemistry and physics, do I have so much faith that I believe God could do a miracle like that, could work a miracle like that? It's a radical kind of faith that you believe miracles like that could happen anytime God wants them to. And it's also a strength of faith I'm finding it's hard to also accept when the miracles don't happen that you want to happen, like my grandson getting better. So yeah, I mean, that's how big God is. That he's like the father that has just a metaphor, I guess, or story. If there's a father who has laws about when the kids get to eat dessert, like no dessert until after dinner. You eat your dinner, then you get dessert. The father could say one day, if a little girl had a really hard time at school and she came home crying and she was upset, he could say, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go get you whatever ice cream you want and serve you up a big bowl of it right now. Before dinner? Yes, before dinner, because I want to communicate my love to you right now. And I can suspend the laws for the sake of doing that. So that's how much God loves us. If miracles made sense according to the laws of nature, they wouldn't be miracles.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Doctor. Our sound, I couldn't really hear you there, but what I will do is I'll go back into the podcast and I'll review what you said.
Okay. And then
Yeah,
thank you, Conrad. And then we'll have Stacy on again before too long. We won't go as long without having her on. And then if her answer is inadequate, we will have you on first to explain to her
Email me.
why that answer was completely inadequate. Thank you, Conrad, very much for the call. Stacy, just a few months ago, you were over in Europe answering questions about the Catholic faith and science, faith and science type questions in Budapest. Still people that believe in God in Europe, and how'd that conversation go with the young people?
Yeah, I went to Budapest for a conference for just a very small number of select college students from 4 different continents who gathered in Budapest for 2 weeks to learn about some of the biggest issues facing Catholic laity right now in our societies. These were individuals who are thought to be leaders one day. So there was a lot of talk about different issues, and the issue I covered was faith and science. And I was privileged beyond words to be in Father Stanley Jaki's country, Hungary, where he was born, to be right there teaching his work to the next generation of Catholic leaders out there in the world. So I made sure they understood what he said about science being born of Christianity.
Okay, we'll just give this ad then for Father Stanley Yaki. Science is Born of Christianity is the big book. But if you want to get a kind of more contemporary interpretation, I suppose, of that work and application of that work, Particles of Faith, the very fine book from Dr. Stacy Trasancos. Stacy, thanks for being here with us. It's just so great to have you on again.
Great. Thank you so much, Cy. Good to see you.
Coming up, Everett Fritz on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host, and as promised on what's really turning out to be a heck of a Monday show. As promised, Everett Fritz here this hour. We're going to talk about raising up the next generation of Catholic leaders. We'll talk about why it does appear in many ways we're failing at that. I'm sure in many, many places and in many cases we're not failing at it. But as a general matter, you'd have to say, well, there's certainly challenges presenting themselves there. And so how can we go about reversing that trend? Everett Fritz is the founder and executive director of Andrew Ministries, which is devoted to training parishes in discipleship and family-based youth ministry. He's got lots of years of experience at this, at working in youth ministry, and he's the author of several books, including One Disciple at a Time: How to Lead Others to Dynamic, Engaged, and Life-Changing Faith. Everett Fritz, thanks for being here with us.
Thanks for having me back. It's I think this is my 5th time.
Is it really?
I'm becoming like the Jerry Seinfeld to your Letterman, you know?
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that.
That's the way I feel. I'm a regular at this point.
I particularly like being categorized with David Letterman. Now my head's really big. The number is 888-318-7884. I'm going to tell you the honest truth about something, Everett. We don't have a lot of open slots anymore on Catholic Answers Live. So Darren and I had to meet in December and say, in 2023, who are the people we really like talking to? And you are, I'm not going to say at the top of that list because we just had Dr. Stacy Trasankos on, and she's definitely above you. But you're very close to the top of the list.
If I were at the top of your list, I would think there would be
There's
something
a problem.
wrong with it. There's a few. There's at least a few that I could come up with who would be better guests.
See, that's
But,
an answer
no,
like
thank
that.
You. I'm privileged and honored and very happy to be on the show.
Well, we're sure happy that you agreed to come on the show, and I hope we'll do a lot more this year. Again, I want to give out the number because maybe you're working in youth ministry or parish ministry. Maybe you're thinking about doing family-based, catechesis and training and evangelization in your parish, in your area. We want you to get on the lines and call 888-318-7884. Maybe you're just a parent who'd like some help. I would like these children of mine to grow up to have a good chance of having the faith in their life. 888-318-7884. Maybe we could start with just your experience of what's happening. Why are we losing them, Everett?
Yeah, I think of my own Catholic parish, and just recently on Pastoral Council, I was chatting with a pastor. We were having a conversation. We were talking about leadership in the parish, and we said, it's the same people who do all the same things. Where are the young families? Where we have tons of young families in our parish. It's actually a very active and thriving parish. But in terms of doing things, we were saying, hey, why is it that these people aren't new blood isn't coming forward to start new ministries or get engaged? And we said, well, is the old blood stepping aside? Is the old blood giving them the opportunity, empowering them? And this then spoke to my heart because youth ministry is my passion, and I can't tell you how much I want to. I love to see young Catholic gifted people have opportunities to serve in meaningful ways in the church. And this is just recently I've been thinking through this and thinking about the lack of opportunity. And I think there's at least in my own Denver area, young families have flocked to a certain number of parishes, and they tended to be parishes that a few years ago were dead. And I think a part of why they're moving there is because they can take over. like there's no one there to stop them. The opportunity is there. And next thing you know, what was previously a parish that was on the verge of closing is thriving with young families everywhere.
Wow.
So, it's just a fascinating thing to think about, in that if the same people have been doing the same things for 20 plus years, and you could say this of all kinds of Catholic circles, is the problem that people aren't coming forward, or is the problem that they're not stepping aside?
That is so interesting, Everett. You always say something that surprises me, and what a great point, that we got to get out of the way and let them do it. And you're making me think of I think almost every elementary school at some point has had those 3 moms who do everything for the PTA and complain that nobody else does it, but they're kind of controlling and bossy, frankly, and that they're keeping other people from doing it because they want to keep doing it the same way. And I love those moms. They're great. I'm sure they're wonderful people, but we all can have that tendency of, you can take over as soon as you can do this job as good as I can do it. And the only person currently who can do it as good as I'm doing it is me.
I'll tell you when this thought started I think a couple of years ago, this thought started to really work its way into my head. And it was, I went to some Catholic conference and they had fantastic Catholic speakers, but it was, every single one of the speakers were speakers that I've heard before, meaning that they'd been speaking at conferences for years and years and years. And I just thought, as I saw that, I said, I'm really tired of hearing insert famous name speaker here.
Yeah.
I don't want to name names, but I'm really tired of hearing this person. Like, their message is as good as ever, but I'd actually rather see this person off the stage, see a millennial up on the stage giving a presentation, and see that person not go away, the older generation, but rather behind the stage mentoring that next generation and giving them the opportunity. And so it's, I can't tell you how frustrating it is when I've noticed it recently just going to all kinds of different Catholic events. It's like, it's all the same people. Where's the new next generation? I can tell you 3 times in my life, I was going to say 4, but 3 times in my life when I have seen someone who eventually became a big Catholic name in terms of the gifts and talents that they had for the church. And I saw them before they were big, and probably in their early 20s. And I remember seeing them get up on a stage and nobody knew who they were. And they gave a presentation, or they led worship, or they did something. And I thought, wow, that person's going to do some big things. And the 3 people were Chris Stefanik, Matt Maher, and Paul J. Kim, who are all huge names in Catholic circles now.
I never heard of any
Saw
of them.
Them all before.
I don't know who any of those people are.
Saw them all before. Saw Matt Maher when he still had blonde in his hair. Now he's got white hair.
Yeah.
But 9 Grammy nominations and big. I remember seeing him and nobody knew who he was, and I just thought, this guy is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like what a tragedy it would have been if his gifts and talents weren't fully realized, if the opportunities didn't present themselves. So it's just something that's been kind of ruminating in my head is the idea that we need to present opportunities for new ideas, new people, and gifted and talented people to come forward.
All right, well, so give me some ideas about how to do that, say at the parish level. And I mean, certainly at the national level, I actually feel kind of proud while you're saying this because Chris and John, the leaders here, have this, affiliate apologist program where they're really working to find the next generation of great apologists because, you can't just go to the same well forever because there's an expiration date on people. So you got to bring them along, but at every level, how might we do this?
I just thinking about the parish. Let's go back to the parish example, and the only reason I'm going back to this is because I had this conversation with somebody 2 days ago over coffee. I was meeting with a guy who was in the Knights of Columbus, younger guy, so unusual that he was a younger guy in the Knights of Columbus, but. We were talking about how most of the Knights of Columbus in parishes are the older gentlemen. And we said, well, what is it that the Knights of Columbus do? Well, they do the pancake breakfast. They do a lot of service work. They have their meetings, etc. Well, who's got time to flip pancakes on a Sunday morning, like all morning? And great, I'm not harping on the Knights of Columbus. I think they're a phenomenal organization.
Of course, yeah.
Do great things. And parishes are in great, super indebted to the service that they give. But I frequently hear from Knights, hey, why don't younger guys join us? And then I look at the activities and I think, okay, I wonder, like, I'm a father of 3 wonderful children. I have no time on my hands. If a Knight came to me and made a sales pitch, and this is literally a sales pitch that I've heard from Knights to come join them, it was something along the lines of, hey, we need young blood. Like, come and join us. Like, we need you to flip pancakes. We need you to do service. We're getting old. Like, and it's like, that is the least appealing invitation. I don't have the time to come and flip pancakes. Mm-hmm. And my friend J.M. Boyd, who works for Glass Canvas, said to me one time that he had received a similar invitation from the Knights, and he was like, that's unappealing. I'm not interested. He says, you know what an invitation would look like that would be appealing? come to our meeting on Tuesday evening and we'll teach you how to drink bourbon. And he says, but there's something in there's a couple of things in that invitation. He says, one, it's fellowship, it's bourbon, but we'll teach you how to. He says, something that I badly need in my life is mentorship. He says, I don't have an older generation in my life who can teach me the finer things of life, who can pass on their wisdom of parenthood, etc. He says, now you're speaking my language. Now you're presenting something to me that I need. Like, that's how you raise up new blood. You have to present to the needs of the people that you're ministering to. If you want to raise up the next generation, give them the opportunities. Yeah, step aside, let new people do new things. That's true. But also just learning to invite people to something that is actually speaks to their need. Why do the Marthas, why are they all 90 years old in the parish? Well, their recruitment activity looks like a luncheon on a Tuesday at 11:30 p.m. Who's going to come to that? Like, nobody young is going to come to that.
I think it's 11:30 a.m. I don't think it's p.m.
Yeah, a.m.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. p.m. They're all.
There's no way they're meeting at 11:30 p.m.
No. Yeah. No, you're only going to get an older generation if you do an 11:30 a.m. luncheon, which is fine if that's what they want to do. Yeah. But you got to think about if you want to raise up new leaders, the invitation has to start with, well, what is it that these people actually feel called to? The young people are going to dead parishes and starting over there because it's easier to just start new than to try to take over the leadership positions that don't exist in parishes because people won't step aside. Anyway, get me on my soapbox.
Yeah, I like getting you on your soapbox because you're always thinking interesting thoughts. 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. If you'd like to talk about raising up the next generation of Catholic leaders, whatever the issue is, we'd love to hear from you. Maybe it's something that you're actively engaged in your parish and you've had successes. You want to share them? Great. Maybe it's something that you are is a great challenge wherever you are, as a parent, as a teacher, as a parish minister. Whatever is the case, you are welcome here. 888-318-7884. Everett Fritz, the director of Andrew Ministries, is our guest. And don't forget the name of that book, One Disciple at a Time, How to Lead Others to Dynamic, Engaged, Life-Changing Faith. 888-318-7884. We take your calls right after this with Everett Fritz on Catholic Answers Live.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
There is tremendous power in prayer because when we acknowledge that we don't have the power, but God does, things then begin to move for our good. Remember Matthew 19:26. But Jesus looked at them and said to them, with men, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. Now that's power.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. So we got one tip so far from Everett Fritz, and I bet it wasn't the one that you were thinking of. As a matter of fact, if you already thought of that, you are on your A game because Everett always brings new and interesting ideas to us. So how are we going to raise up the next generation of leaders in the Catholic Church? Tip one, get out of their way. Let them take over. Let them do stuff. Let them create and engage in the way that they do with their peer group. The number is 888-318-7884. Give us another tip before I go to the phones. What else can we do? How can we raise up a generation of leaders, people who really care about sharing the faith and can do it?
So much of what I do in ministry, and again, I do a lot of work with youth ministry, but I like to do one-to-one discipleship. And if you are working with people who are at different stages of their faith journey, but at some point in the stage of their faith journey, you have to invite them and call them into mission. I say of young adult ministry all the time, if you haven't given them a mission, these people want to light the world on fire. They're at a point in their lives where the weight of the world has not crushed their spirits yet, and they haven't gotten disillusioned about nothing can change. I'm at that point now, but I'm not a 20-something. So, there is a reality that, look, every revolution that's ever happened in the world started with young people. You look at the American Revolution, you look at the ages of our founding fathers, they were in their 20s, most of them. That's, Alexander Hamilton. If you watch the Hamilton show, it starts with him at age 18. Why did why did Pope St. John Paul II start World Youth Day? I firmly believe it's because he wanted to start a revolution. Yeah. So it's a matter of saying, okay, how do we call people? You have to identify the Holy Spirit gives people gifts and charisms that are unique to them, and they're for the purposes of building up the church. And unless you actually say to them, hey, I see this in you, and I want to invite you to come and share these gifts and do these things, it's not going to happen. Those gifts remain dormant.
No, that's right. 888-318-7884, the number. I'm going to go to Linda and take her call, and several other callers on here. But when you were speaking about that, it made me think, Everett, and I just want to share this with you. A good friend of mine, she was in her 80s. She died recently, and she and her husband had a whole big Catholic family. But when they were very young, at their parish, someone started a Catholic family group where families would just get together. And sometimes she would tell me about how much of a difference that made over the course of her life, because they stayed in contact and these families grew up together. So it's not a small thing that you do when you do what you're talking about finding a way to give them what they need. They needed a family group. They needed something that would help them as parents, where they could sit around and talk about the Catholic faith. And this got them through their whole life. And so at the end of her life, she could see the great value in this. So I really want to encourage. I wanted to share that story with you, Everett, because you work with people on the young side of life. But these things can make a lifetime of difference for people if you can find the thing that they need and that gives them that sense of purpose and mission and gives them the thing to do. All right, so now I'll go to Linda in St. Louis, Missouri, listening on the Covenant Radio Network. Linda, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Everett Fritz.
Hi, I just have a comment, maybe not a question. I don't understand why we don't involve more young married couples. I'm in my 60s, and I wanted to start a Bible study, and they're like, "Oh yeah, sure, go ahead, start one." And I think I'm the youngest one there, and I'm 60. It's just like,
yeah.
Well, 60 is young. I don't know if you know this, but it's the new 30. But I get what you're saying. I just want to say that because I'm coming up on 60. But Everett, what do you say to that?
Well, I'd have a lot of questions. So when does the group meet? How was it advertised? What was the you're right that it doesn't surprise me that's the demographic of people you're getting. Those tend to be the people who have time and are interested and invested. And to be fair too, the younger generation, if they don't think that their friends will be there or that there are going to be other younger couples there, they will not show up. There's something that's happened with the later millennial generation and current Gen Z, that it used to be that if you wanted to make friends, you would show up to something where there were a large number of people, get to know people, and then from there you would develop an affinity group. Nowadays, young people, and you could say this of young families as well, they want their affinity group. They check with their affinity group, are you going to this large thing? And if they're not, they don't show up together. So it's a matter of like the thing that gets them there is their already existing intimate friendships. Going to something to meet new people is just not an attraction to a younger generation. So how do you get those people there? Well, the solution is actually to develop friendships with them. And you say, well, how can I develop friendships with them if they're not already there? I kid you not, I have probably 5 to 10 coffee chats a week at least, where I invite people out to coffee that I see. In a lot of cases, I run into them at Mass, or maybe it's even a new person I haven't met before. And I get in a conversation and I say, let's go out to coffee. And I get their contact information and I go. And then usually from there, like I start to develop a friendship with them, and then I will invite them to something. So I would encourage you, if you want to get young Catholic families there, find a young Catholic family, a couple that is in your parish. Maybe somebody that other families follow, if you can actually identify who's kind of the lead couple, and invite them out to coffee and start to say, hey, what's going on in your life? Tell me how we can support you. Get to know their story a little bit, and you might find that, hey, they were interested in the Bible study, and a personalized invitation actually gets them there. Or they might say, you know what, I was interested in the Bible study, but it meets at 11 o'clock on Tuesdays and I work at that time. And you say, well, you know what, we need to have an evening chapter of this group. But you're never going to know, like, what is it that's actually going to meet these needs and actually get them there unless you actually talk to them.
Linda, I want to come back to you and see what you think.
Butt in for a second.
Go ahead, Linda.
Can
Yes.
I say that, I also have a group of Protestant friends that are in a Bible study, and our group started with 6 people. Now we're up to 12. And their leaders told them at the group, when it hits 10, you have to divide. So nobody really wants to divide because we've grown to love each other in 3 years. But we also want to encourage others to love Jesus. So we're dividing. And I don't see that in the Catholic Church. I don't see, they have their Bible studies, but they won't divide. And it's like, okay, good luck on your own. And we want, the ones that are pros at this to help us.
Yeah, no,
How do you get
it
them
is.
to do that?
It is true. I actually hate the division idea, but that's because once you form a tight-knit community, which is what I would call a small group, you should you're striving for intimate, virtuous friendships. But there does need to be an attitude of invitation, and you're right. Then it becomes larger, and maybe it becomes a second. But it should divide organically, not we've hit a certain number, therefore now divide. There is an attitude among many Catholics that I meet of all generations. So this is not a certain generational problem, where they try to get their needs met in a certain way, and then once they do, they become exclusive. We would call that a clique, which is not what Jesus wants. If you actually have and I think it's a protective measure that people take, is that once your group becomes close and tight-knit and your needs are being met, you don't want to throw off the dynamic by inviting new people in, but that's counterintuitive to spreading the gospel. I challenge people all the time because I actually see what I think is becoming something that is toxic in the church, in that I see people trying to create safe bubbles, particularly young families, to raise their kids in, and rebuild Christendom within those bubbles. And I'm like, that's never going to work. That's just not the age of the world that we live in. I said this at a conference recently where I said, look, more and more I'm finding Christians that are isolating from the world and want to build safe spaces where they can have community with one another, but then they are isolating from the world in which they are called to evangelize. Christians are not supposed to have safe spaces. Liberal elitist snowflakes have safe spaces. That's not what a Christian is supposed to do. Now, how do you get out of that? It's just look, if you figure it out, let me know. But I just keep calling people to invite, go out of your comfort zone, get to know your neighbors, etc. Challenging people to get out of their comfort zones.
Linda, I want to go back to you because it's a fascinating conversation. We do have other folks on the line, but did you want to? Was there more that you wanted to say?
I just want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
Why don't we have a Wednesday night praise session? We have our Mass, and I absolutely love our Mass. I could not live without the Eucharist. But it would also be nice to have the young people again, a group to praise and worship, and then go chat. Does any Catholic church does that, or is that too Protestant?
Oh, I know.
No,
I know many Catholic churches that do that. I will say, look, there are many times when I have gone to prayer and said to the Lord, why don't we have this thing? It seems like a no-brainer to me, and I find that is an invitation from. I will almost always get the response of, because I'm waiting for you to start it, and so I'm like, okay, why don't we have, such and such a Bible study? Why don't we have a men's ministry? Why don't we have a youth ministry that's focused on discipleship? And the Lord has said to me, because I'm waiting for you to start it. So if you feel called to something, if you see a need, don't sit on the sidelines. It's maybe you don't have the ability to lead worship, but you see a need there. Start talking around and asking where you can find a worship leader.
Okay.
Your pastor at your parish and say, hey, we have this idea. Let's pray through it.
Linda, you got us right up to the break. Thank you for that. A wonderful conversation. We need to have these conversations because just so much is needed. And I think there's lots of people, myself included, who sometimes look around and go, what is the next thing to do? We need to keep being creative and finding ways to share the good news. We'll do more of that with Everett Fritz right after this on Catholic Answers Live. The recent decision by the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade was a monumental victory for the pro-life movement. But the fight is far from over. With our new booklet, Why We're Pro-Life, we have produced the perfect tool to prepare you to have peaceful and convincing conversations to shed light on the truth about human life from conception to natural death. Catholic Answers is printing millions of copies of this booklet, and we plan simply to give them away. You can help us in two ways. First, by generously supporting this project. 25 cents prints one book, $2,500 prints 10,000, and so on. Second, by helping us distribute the booklet through your parish, your school, or the pro-life ministry you work with. Catholic Answers is going to blanket the country with why we're pro-life, but only if you step up and help us. Thank you so much. For more information, visit whyweareprolife.com.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity in The Early Church Was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
As Catholic apologetics have gotten stronger, Protestant responses have gotten stronger as well. And now they have their own answers to rebut the standard Catholic proofs. Don't fret, we've got you covered. In his new book, Meeting the Protestant Response, apologist Carlo Broussard gives well-reasoned biblical answers to Protestant comebacks. Order your copy of Meeting the Protestant Response today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Hi, this is Janet Williams. Please join us for Women of Grace tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern here on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. Nobody knows if Everett Fritz goes out to all these coffee meetings just because he likes coffee or because he really wants to share the Lord. But I think it has to do with both, actually. I think
that's why I talk so fast. I'm just on adrenaline and caffeine.
Yeah. I've had 11 coffee meetings today. Lots of folks on the line. We're talking about how to form, how to build, how to find, all those things we got to do. It's a creative act. It's not just a matter of plug and play. It's a creative act. Of building. How do we build up the leaders that we need for the coming years of the church? Everett Fritz is our guest, and on the line we have several people. We do have time for you if you want to call, 888-318-7884. We're going to Marie in Texas right now, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Marie, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question or comment for Everett Fritz.
It's a comment, and I would like to say I'm 60 years old, so this is a little bit personal for me. We have of course we want the younger people to come to the church. Of course we do. But in my particular parish, we have a, hipster millennial priest who is, energetic, and we love that about him, but he doesn't want old people there, and he is pushing us out. And so I'm on the young end of the people. So now that my kids have grown and they've left the house, and I now have the time and the talent and the treasure, and I turn to the church to participate and to grow in my faith, I don't have anything to do. There is nothing being offered to me. And I'm finding that with many of the old people that are in my parish. They've been members of that parish for 70 years. They raised families in that parish. And they're being pushed out. And we have, we kind of joke. The joke is that we're Roman Catholics because we go from parish to parish to parish, just going to attend Mass wherever we feel like we're being fed. And so I just would caution against that. That's just my take on it.
Well, can you hang on and we'll make it a conversation, Marie? We'll get Everett's response, then we'll come back to you. Is that all right?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Everett, what do you make of that? That sounds kind of horrible to me, actually.
Yeah, I think it's look, I've met many a young hipster priest that have the best of intentions, but they don't have refined pastoral approaches yet. And so while there may be a good intention behind something, they end up making people feel like they're not wanted. That's the last thing we want in the church, is making people feel like they don't belong. I can sympathize with a new pastor coming into a parish and looking at the landscape of his parish and saying, if we don't get young blood in here, this parish is not going to survive, because that's actually a common occurrence. So I can sympathize. Like, I'm trying to look at it from the perspective of the pastor. If his intention is, we're going to minister to younger families or younger people, we're going to get new leadership in, we want new ideas, it's time. I would say that it's important to say, okay, is this a response to the work of the Holy Spirit saying it's time for the parish to turn a page? Now, where this gets into the problem that you're having is, if that's then done in a way that is not pastoral, and in a way that's pushing people out of positions of leadership rather than giving them a new position of leadership, like mentoring the next generation. This is why I said I don't want to see that Catholic speaker that's been speaking on stage for 20 years go away. I just want to see them get a new role. So it's there's a major lost opportunity there if he's losing that kind of wisdom, making people feel like they're no longer welcome. And I think that, again, I don't know what young hipster means in terms of age or in terms of his experience. It may be hey, he doesn't have a pastoral approach that's refined yet. I would say, honestly, like if I were to give a recommendation to you, I would sit down with Father and say, cordially, hey, look, I still have time and talent and treasures to give, and I really want to give them, and this is the way I feel, and that's not accusatory. I actually want to know what your vision is, and tell me how I can work within the vision that you have. Like, where do you see my gifts and talents working within this new vision that you might have, and see if you have a meeting of the minds there. But yeah, I can sympathize. Like, nobody wants to be made to feel like their church community, they're no longer welcome. That's pretty awful. And my guess is that your pastor has good intentions, but not necessarily the best approach.
Marie, your take.
Well, you're being charitable. That's actually not the case. People have met with him, and he's, out with the old, in with the new.
Yeah.
So it's okay. There's other churches in town, and we can go there.
Well, so. I think it's noble of you to say that, but it's really not okay. I mean, and again, the truth is, some priests are turkeys. I mean, that happens.
I'm being charitable. Yeah, I'm being charitable, but I've met many pastors who are jerks, and
I've never met one who's a jerk. I've met some that are turkeys, but I've never met. No, actually, that's not true. Yeah, so I see that, and I think Marie, if I'm not mistaken, you're listening to the first half of the show where Everett's saying we need to make room for these young leaders, and you're saying, hey, there still needs to be room for me. Am I reading that right?
That's correct, and please understand, I want the new leaders there too.
Sure.
But again, I would like to be in a mentor position. I have, 20 years of experience. I've seen a lot of things, and I will say, without going into detail, I was in an advisory position to that pastor who just didn't want to hear what I had to say because I wasn't saying yes to everything I wasn't saying that's a great idea. I was saying, you know what, we tried that back in 2005, and here's what happened. And it was, so that's sort of, like I said, I'm coming from a position of pain. But that is an unfortunate thing, is that we well, anyway, the Pope Francis said in a homily once that a shepherd needs to smell like his flock. And it occurred to me after speaking with him is that there's two different ways for a shepherd to smell like his flock. One is to serve his sheep, and the other is to get different sheep that smell like him. And that is what our pastor has done. And so I would just, we do very much want the young people there. We don't want to look around at all of our old wrinkled faces and old stale ideas, but don't push the experience and the wisdom out. We've been around the block. We've seen it. We know what might work and what might not work.
Yeah, that's honestly, you said it beautifully. I would reiterate, if there are any priests listening, pastors listening, we are so thankful for your ministries to our priests. We are so thankful for what you do for us. I think that the best way to summarize what you said is that there's a right way and a wrong way to do something, and pushing people out. Sometimes it's absolutely necessary if somebody's toxic, but it doesn't sound like that's the case in your case.
No.
Pushing people out is not the right way to go about doing something.
Maria, I want to apologize to you right now for this. That what you just said about getting a new flock of sheep that smells like him. Later, I'm going to think about what you said, and I'm going to think that I thought of it, and then I'm going to start saying it like it was my idea, because that is such a good line. And I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it on purpose, but that was a quite a striking statement, and I really food for thought there. Maria, I really enjoyed the conversation. I got to go to the break. Is that all right with you?
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Very, very helpful. Everett Fritz is our guest. We're talking about bringing up that next generation of leaders in the church. How do we go about doing that? Whether you're a parent, a teacher, maybe you're a pastor yourself, maybe you're a rotten pastor who wants to call and be mad at us for talking about rotten pastors. No, I'm sure you're not. Give us a call, though, 888-318-7884.
It's all about the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
EWTN offers listeners and viewers the daily readings to enable you to accompany the Mass of the day. Our Catholic daily readings include the readings of the day, along with online videos. It's a great resource for all who desire to live a life of faith that is pleasing to our Lord. Visit EWTN.com and click Catholicism. EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Do you love sharing the gospel and want to learn to be more effective? Join the St. Paul Street Evangelization online School of Evangelization. You will learn to build bridges of trust and make disciples by befriending strangers, proclaiming the gospel, inviting people to the church, and praying with others. We'll ask for a pledge of financial support, but if you are unable to give, we'll give you a membership at no cost. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I can honestly say I don't think there's anybody in the world who has the full and complete answer, or even an answer that that fully can be implemented yet. We're all struggling and searching in this regard, but one of the people who's in the forefront of thinking about these things, and why we very much enjoy having him here, is Everett Fritz, the author of One Disciple at a Time: How to Lead Others to Dynamic, Engaged, Life-Changing Faith. And we're talking about how do we get that next generation of leaders to take up the mantle of leadership in the Catholic Church. You are welcome to call with your questions or comments, 888-318-7884. Certainly one of the things we need to do is stop bleeding young people, and that's a tall order. But Everett, we got more calls. Shall I go back to the phones, or was there another point you wanted to make before I do that?
Nope.
All right.
Let's hear the next question.
Back to the phones we go. Kathy in Florida, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Kathy, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question or comment for Everett.
Yes, I'm calling because I spent a few days with one of my grandsons who's supposed to be confirmed this spring, and I just find him so unengaged with his faith. I don't know where the problem, or if it's just his personality, and I just want to know, as a grandmother, I want to know how to help him. I've given him books. I don't think he reads them. I don't even know if I should bring it up because I'm not raising him. I was helping out.
Sure.
On a short-term basis. But I'm very close to these children, and I just want to know, I would love for him to be a leader, and that's what my dream is for him, but I don't know as a grandparent how to make this happen when it doesn't seem to be happening, and if maybe he should even be delaying his confirmation.
All right, let's get Everett, and we'll come back to you, Kathy. Everett?
Oh, real quick, Kathy, what is the faith practice of his parents, if you don't mind me asking?
The mother is Catholic and a practicing Catholic. Takes her two sons to church each week, as faithfully. He comes with us sometimes, but his father is not Catholic, not anything.
Okay.
He was raised in a home which was Muslim, but he is not a practicing Muslim.
Okay. Just real quick, an observation is that young people, and this isn't 100% true, but young people will tend to imitate the faith practice of their father more than they will their mother. And that's just an observation from having worked with young people for 16 plus years. Look, the reality is, where is he at in terms of his faith? My guess is that he's like most 15-year-olds that I meet who come into the doors of a parish seeking the sacrament of confirmation, in that they're doing it because their parent is forcing them to be there. They go through the steps, they receive the sacrament, and then the church never sees them again. The average age the fastest growing religious denomination in the country today is not affiliated. It's the majority religion among young people today. I mean, we are losing our young people in droves. I would love to sit here and dissect what does his formation look like in the parish in preparation for the sacrament of confirmation, but we'd be here for a while. So it's, there's something to be said for, is the parish meeting his needs? Is the parish providing good formation? In many cases, that's not typically the case. Should he get confirmed? I will tell you this is my personal opinion. Absolutely. He needs the sacramental grace of understanding and knowledge and piety and fear of the Lord. Like, that is supernatural grace. Now, will it take hold for somebody who's not practicing? Not necessarily, but it'll be there. Look, I was not ready to receive the sacrament of confirmation in terms of being open when I was 14 and received it. And somehow the Lord worked on me. In general, for those who are listening and they're wondering, what do I do with my 15-year-old that is not interested in church and in practices and in what the two things I will say is that the number one reason why young people are leaving the church today, and if I were to summarize it, because there's all kinds of different reasons why they leave, but if I were to summarize it in one sentence, I would say it's because the church doesn't meet their needs. Maslow has this theory of psychology known as the hierarchy of needs, that if your basic needs aren't met as a person, you never get to a point of self-actualization, meaning that for our purposes, like if a young person's basic needs aren't met, they're not going to get to a point of lifelong discipleship. So first and foremost, like, what does your grandson need? He needs a relationship with somebody who is a practicing Catholic, which it sounds like that's something you have. And I would say continue to pour into that relationship. Because there will be times in the course of his life where conversations will come up where you have an opportunity to give witness. The other thing that he needs is an encounter with Jesus Christ, that we can teach them catechesis till we're blue in the face. If they don't know Jesus, if they've never encountered him, it goes in one ear, out the other. It's like, why am I learning about the sacrament of baptism or confirmation or the Eucharist? Like, this doesn't seem like it has any meaning for my life. Then you meet Jesus tangibly in a real experience, and you're like, oh, all this catechesis I got, now it makes sense. Now I'm interested. That was my experience. So as much as there might be an opportunity for a youth retreat, a youth camp, there are the Seek conference when he gets a little bit older, done by Focus. There are opportunities for encounter that develop, that have been developed, that would be beneficial for him potentially. Number one thing you can do, though, is just pour into him as a human being, love him, build a relationship with him, and see how the conversation naturally and organically develops.
All right, Kathy, what do you think?
Well, I appreciate that, yes.
Okay.
That gives me a direction. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. All right, very good.
Good.
Thank you very, very much. The number here is 888-318-7884. Our guest is Everett Fritz, and I haven't allowed you, Everett, to talk about your own ministry, and maybe you want to talk about Andrew Ministries just for a minute. And I will go back to the calls.
Sure.
But
yeah, I think, and I'd love to sit here and dissect our last callers. Like I said, I could sit here for an hour and dissect all the different things that they're doing in terms of his formation, his parish, and we could really get into more specifics about what he needs. That's what I do with people with Andrew Ministries. But it's like, okay, in a 2 or 3 or 4 minute answer, how can I give some sort of direction? My heart breaks because it's like, yeah, I meet parents and grandparents all the time that want nothing more than for their child or their grandchild to meet the love of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
And it's like, okay, every person has a story, every person has a journey, every person meets Jesus at different times in their life. The best advice I could give from a general standpoint is walk alongside of them so that you can be there when begin to become attentive to what Jesus is speaking to them, and you can help with that process. And that's a journey that I find a lot of people aren't willing to go on with anybody because it's time consuming. What do I do with it? So Andrew Ministries is an apostle I started back in 2017, and it's because I'm a big believer that the way we're forming young people in the church is just incorrect. It's just wrong. I want to see the church return to the way Jesus did ministry, because if you look at the way Jesus did ministry, he was focused on the crowds, sure, but his most successful ministry was among the 12, and even among 12 there were 3, and even among the 3 there was 1. Like, I think God's plan to conquer the world started with St. Peter. He focused small and then grew big. And so there came a point in my own ministry with young people 10, 11 years ago where I had a big, huge youth group, and I realized that 90% of them were not practicing the faith once they graduated high school. And yet my youth group looked really successful. Like it had all the bells and whistles that I was told a youth ministry needed. And when I actually dug into what was the most successful thing was the small groups that we were doing. And so I flipped a ministry and started focusing in on, rather than having one youth group on Sundays, we did with like 12 small groups throughout the week, and just assigned adult mentors to a handful of young people who were friends with one another. So affinity groups, like I talked about, put an adult mentor in their life and just said, pour into these young people for 4 years and teach them what it means means to live Catholicism. I kid you not, the youth ministries that I helped to found now around the country are some of the most successful youth ministries. They thrived during the pandemic. Like every youth ministry I know fell apart during the pandemic, except the ones that I worked with. I have a Catholic high school. If you are not familiar, Ut Feedom would love a shout out here. Ut Feedom in Dowling Catholic High School in Des Moines, Iowa. You can find them at utfeedom.org. They started small groups back in 2017. I worked with them to get the first couple off the ground. They finished last school year with 62 discipleship groups going in their school. Over 333 students voluntarily participating, receiving mentorship from an adult on a weekly basis with them and their friends. But they've been doing a study for 4 years where they actually have been following the students through college to see if they are still practicing the faith in college. And they found that by every measure that they measured, the Ut Feedom discipleship groups, those who were discipled in a smaller environment, were practicing their faith in college. So I think it was something like after the first year of college, 95% were still active Catholics. Even after 4 years of college, 59% were still weekly mass goers. I mean, the statistics were out of this world. So, and I'm starting to get those kinds of testimonies from a lot of places. So it really is like you focus small, you focus on individual needs, and then you grow from there. And that's what I'm finding in terms of ministry. It's like, this is what's working right now. Let's go back to the way Jesus did things.
Is there a website people can visit for Andrew Ministries?
Andrew Ministries, yeah. I should probably plug my own stuff. Andrew Ministries is andrew-ministries.com. And I have blogs and articles. I have my own podcast called Holy Conundrums, several books, The Art of Forming Young Disciples, One Disciple at a Time, just trying to create more and more resources, pushing people to discipleship and how to do it.
Let's go to Granger in Lincoln, Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Granger, welcome. Go ahead with your question for our guest, Everett Fritz.
Hello.
Hi, Granger.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for having me. We have we're trying to start up a skateboard ministry here in Lincoln, and it's just me and my buddy, and it's kind of, it went away for about 2 months, but we started it in the summer, and we just picked it up about 2 weeks ago, and we're just trying to get some advice on like what to do. It's just me and my buddy right now, and people we talk to.
You say skateboard ministry. So the way I define ministry is about meeting the needs of a person. So homeless ministry, you feed the hungry, you clothe the naked, you provide shelter. A hospital ministry, you're taking care of the sick and dying, and you do this as part of evangelization. So what does a skateboard ministry look like? What need are you trying to meet?
I guess what we're trying to, we just don't see a lot of faith in just the skateboard culture in general. So we're just trying to maybe infiltrate that and just kind of like say, hey, there's a lot of things that skateboarding, virtue and faith relate to skateboarding, and that it's normal and cool to have faith, I guess. But just build friendship, I guess.
Yeah, I'm like, I know nothing about the skateboard community. So in terms of giving advice, I can give you general advice. Look, one of the most successful things that I did with a group of young people who were really, really difficult teens to work with. They were very hard-hearted. And a mentor of mine said, well, I was just expressing my frustration about how our small group wasn't going well. And he said, have you taken the time to win the relationship yet? And I said, when we talked about what that meant, I realized that there was not I wasn't pouring into the guy, like they didn't trust me yet. And so I could, in terms of whatever I was teaching them in a Bible study, they couldn't care less because they didn't trust me yet. And so I spent the summer going mini golfing with them. And we went to Mass on Sunday, and then we went mini golfing afterwards. And then we'd end up at this disgusting, greasy Mexican restaurant across from the who I found out later was selling drugs out of their kitchen. That was the kind of place this place was. And we did 5 minutes of Bible study there. And it did that all summer. It was the most successful thing that we did. And by the end, it won the relationship. So I would say, skate with the skateboarding guys, and then say, hey, we're going to go to mass beforehand. Anybody who wants to join us? We're going to do 5 minutes of Bible study at the end of this. Anybody who wants to join us, take advantage of that like-minded thing that you do, and slowly start to bring faith into it.
Granger, I'm very interested in what you're doing. If you would leave your email with Edgar before you go, we'll give you some materials, but I'd also like to just hear more about what you're doing. You can't just come here on the last minute and tell us you got a skateboard ministry going. I got to know more about that. So hang on, Granger. Everett Fritz, Andrew Ministries, God bless you, brother. Thank you for another wonderful hour of Catholic Answers Live.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
We'll review that policy.